Tonight's episode of Virtual Skeptics is rated TV-MA for language. Viewer discretion is advised. This week on the Virtual Skeptics, Bob has the plague. Eve fucking loves etymology. We warned you. Barb is shaking her head, and Tim is all googly-eyed because he's the host. Here we are, folks. This is Virtual Skeptics. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Tim.
I'm your host. This week, Brian's not here, although, did I understand correctly that he might join us?
I don't think so.
I didn't hear that.
Probably not, but you never know. So here we are. We're live on the internet, and as usual, you can respond to us in the YouTube comments or on hashtag Virtual Skeptics, and we'll try to get back to you and or answer your questions or whatever. And we should have the Q&A app running, I believe, so you can ask proper questions that way. Please ask them in the form of a question, or Alex Trebek will buzz you out. But let me introduce our very small panel this week. First, we have Eve Siebert, editor and blogger at Skeptical Humanities and contributor to Skepticality and Insight at skeptic.com. We have Barbara Drescher, former psychology instructor, blogger at ICBS Everywhere, and contributor to skeptical projects such as Insight at skeptic.com and The Odds Must Be Crazy. And me, if my mouse would work. Hi, I'm Tim Farley, blogger at SkepTools and Insight at skeptic.com, Skepticality contributor, creator of What's the Harm, and general online nuisance. So hi everybody. We don't have any TV screens behind me, so nothing to do in that department, but we do have a skeptic trivia question that you can work on while we get into our topics. There's an anniversary coming up in July. It's the 45th, if I'm doing my math right, minus 1971. Yeah, 45th anniversary of a New York Times article that was written by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist James Reston. And it was about an incident, and I have to be careful how I word this so I don't give it away, but one time he was traveling overseas and had to have emergency surgery. And he wrote an article about it in the New York Times on July 26, 1971, and that article had the effect of popularizing what in the United States? What did he write about his emergency surgery overseas that then became much more popular in the United States after that article? So that's your trivia question. And so let's go right into our first topic, which is Barbara.
Okay, well, mine's pretty short, actually. This popped up in my news feed, and I couldn't resist it. In Brockton, Ontario, police and firefighters were called in after a heated discussion over the shape of the Earth reached fiery levels in eastern Ontario. So apparently, they were called to St. Lawrence Park on a Monday after an intense argument between family members. They say a woman who insisted the Earth was flat was locking horns with her boyfriend's father, who argued it is round. Investigators say the 56-year-old man grew so enraged that he started throwing things into their campfire, including a propane cylinder.
Ooh, that's not a good
Firefighters
idea.
were called to put out the flames. Police say the man took off and will face a mischief charge. They say neither party would change their views.
Well, if propane in fire won't convince you.
Yeah. I just thought it was really interesting how nonpartisan, objective that piece was written. It was, which is kind of rare in journalism today. And yet, yeah, it was like neither one would change their views. Yeah, nobody would they couldn't have a civil discussion about the shape of the Earth.
The shape of the Earth.
Yeah, so apparently there are still people who are that passionate about the Earth being flat.
Yeah, well, didn't Neil deGrasse Tyson just get into an argument with somebody a few months ago about that?
Did he?
Yeah.
Yeah, some rapper from here in Atlanta.
Oh, yeah.
Claiming the Earth was flat, and Neil deGrasse Tyson ended up doing a rap and doing a mic drop somewhere on the Tonight Show or something. Some show let him come on and do a rap about it.
I didn't see that. Now I want to watch it. Maybe I should have gotten that, because then I could fill in the time, because this isn't even 3 minutes. But I couldn't pass up the story either, because wow.
Yeah, that's.
These were Canadian.
What did I just do?
Yeah,
Not
they're
even-
supposed to be nice. Maybe
Yeah.
they're only nice to Americans,
Yeah.
Oh.
not to each other.
Hmm.
They didn't say. You know what they also didn't say? They didn't say if there was alcohol involved.
Oh, there was alcohol involved.
You know there was.
I'm going to say there was
There
alcohol.
was. I don't think you throw a propane cylinder into a fire if there's not alcohol involved. What's interesting about that is the one who got the most upset that he threw a propane cylinder into a fire was the man who thought the Earth was round,
Yeah.
Right,
and
I know.
he couldn't convince her.
Right.
Why should he care?
It's sort of
Right.
one of those things about how do we win over people with strange beliefs. And I believe number one should be don't throw a propane cylinder on the fire.
Rule number one: remain calm.
I think
I've
that's
been.
more important than avoiding sarcasm or anything like that.
Yeah.
Don't cause an explosion.
I can identify with it. I've never thrown a propane cylinder into a fire over it, but I have had incidents where people that I respected and thought highly of said things that were not evidence-based to me, and it's very upsetting when you realize that someone that you think is very smart suddenly spits off a conspiracy theory or something really stupid to you, and in this particular case, I got mad at the guy, and he took the fact that I got mad as evidence. Well, there must be something to this conspiracy theory, because why are you getting so mad about it? And it's like, well, that makes no sense, but touche for using my own inappropriate emotional reaction against me.
So that's it. That's all I had.
Oh, well, even Canadians. Of course, in the United States, there would have been an automatic weapon or something involved.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, then it would be real news.
Yeah. Okay, so on to me, I guess, and my slides have disappeared over here. Yeah, well, the monitor went dead. My thing I'm going to talk about has to do with Google, and specifically the Google. I don't know what they call the cards. Knowledge cards or whatever, but it's the Google Knowledge Base stuff, and it's those little cards that you see to the right of search engine results. If you've used Google in the last few years, and I've written about this a couple times on the SkepTools blog, they try to surface good results for simple questions like, what's the capital of Idaho, or when was Einstein born, or who directed The Empire Strikes Back. Questions like that, Google can pull the answers out and put them in large text right at the top, so you don't have to dig in and click the links. And they're doing that, and they've written some interesting papers about how they scrape that information off the web and figure out what facts are actually facts and relate them to each other. And it doesn't work for everything. It works for simple declarative statements like birthdays and locations of things and stuff like the things I just answered. Well, I had something come up. I was researching a Wikipedia article that was fairly small and I thought deserved to be expanded, and it's about a psychologist from the early 20th century named Amy Tanner. And she is somewhat known in skeptical circles for a book she wrote in 1910 called Studies in Spiritism, and it's they took a Boston psychic, Leonora Piper, one of the psychic mediums that were, there was one on every street corner, it seems, when you read some of these accounts from the 1880s through the 1920s and 30s. They were all over the place.
William James's White Crow.
Yeah, William James was famous for, he loved Leonora Piper. And Amy Tanner wrote this study where she and G. Stanley Hall, who was the president of Clark University in Worcester, Mass., and a famous psychologist himself, did a study of Leonora Piper because she was from Boston, which was quite nearby, so she was accessible to them. And they tried to do a skeptical study and see if they could figure out reasons, and their conclusion was that she was not. One of the key things they did in their study is they were able to feed her deceptive information and get her spirit guides or whatever, her controls or whatever the term was they used at the time, to feed back wrong information, which is the classic way to prove that a medium is not actually channeling someone. Have them, I talked about Rose Mackenberg. Her classic thing was to get the medium to tell her about her dead husband, and she had been single her entire life. So some of the headlines about her said that she had 38 dead husbands, none of whom she'd ever met. And so obviously, either all the ghosts in the world are liars or idiots, or the medium is making stuff up, right? And if the ghosts are liars and idiots, then even if they are psychic, it's pretty useless. It's a pretty useless skill. So the Studies in Spiritism was one of the first studies where they did this, and they reached the conclusion that it was some sort of psychological thing going on with Leonora Piper, that she perhaps had alternate personalities, and it was her own alternate personalities, because there was some evidence that she seemed like she didn't remember some of the things that happened under the trances or whatever. There was some, when she was in the trance, she was really out. But she would regurgitate this false information that she had been fed. And of course, the paranormalists didn't like this study and anything. So anyway, I was looking to expand her article, and I was digging around and linking up, doing some technical things on Wikipedia to link her to the Library of Congress so you could find her book and stuff like that. And lo and behold, I noticed her birthday was wrong. The Wikipedia article had her as having been born in 1877, but the Library of Congress, on her official record, had her birthday in 1870. And I thought, well, the Library of Congress must have gotten that from somewhere. And we dug some more, and there were a number of various who's who's and college directories and things from the time. It's one of the nice things about researching stuff from over 100 years ago is all that stuff's out of copyright, so everything's in Google Books. So you can find all these old college catalogs and who's who's, and a whole lot of the stuff that Amy Tanner wrote is available for free on JSTOR. So it makes it super easy to link everything up and find all sorts of interesting details. And I found a lot of evidence that her birthday was March 21st, I think, 1870. I couldn't find her date of death, so I fixed her birthday and footnoted it, and then put a little citation needed next to her date of death. Now, they had her birth and death as 1877 and 1964, and I dug around on other sources on the web, and it appears that how that got that way on Wikipedia is there was another Amy Tanner, as you might guess, in the United States. A name like Amy Tanner, indeed a name like Tim Farley, is pretty common. There's a lot of people who have that same name. And lo and behold, there was an Amy A. Tanner who was born in 1877 and died in 1964 and is buried in Pennsylvania. That's not Amy Tanner, the psychologist, because she's not buried in Pennsylvania. There wouldn't have been any reason for her to be buried in Pennsylvania, and I'll get to it, but I found out where she is buried. So I put her correct birthday in there, and I started digging around, and I contacted the, it happens that there's a really nice museum in Worcester, a historical museum, and the Clark University has an archivist, and I contacted both of those sources via email, and lo and behold, I was able to find that one of them had a scanned obituary for her, and it turns out she died in 1956. So I fixed that on the Wikipedia article, and then I was, kind of wondering, well, how did Wikipedia get this? Well, the Wikipedia article was written in 2013, and there are two other good articles about Amy Tanner on the web. One is on Skeptics Dictionary, and that was written in 2011. And there was one that's older than that that's on a website called Psychology's Feminist Voices that has a bunch of female psychologists. That's where everybody was getting her date of birth and date of death. And, no criticism of them, but they had just come up with the wrong Amy Tanner when they researched that article, and the information wasn't correct. And what was happening was, it was in classic fashion, it was getting copied and copied and copied from one article to the other. So when I finally found the correct dates of birth and death, I actually contacted... Well, actually, in the process of my research, I had contacted the woman who wrote the profile of Amy Tanner on Psychology's Feminist Voices, and asked her where she got the date of birth and death, and if she had any better sources. She didn't. But when I found the correct dates of birth and death, I corrected her. I sent it to her, and I said, hey, if you still have access to the site, if you're still updating the site, you might want to update this on the site. And I also sent it to Robert Todd Carroll, who does the Skeptics Dictionary. I said, hey, I gave him all the details and where my sources were and that he had Amy Tanner's birthday and date of death wrong, and he fixed it on his. So now if you Google Amy Tanner and you go to the three web pages, Wikipedia, Skeptics Dictionary, and Psychology's Feminist Voices, they all have her date of birth and death correct now. Here's where I get to my topic. That was a long way to get to what I actually wanted to talk about, which is those Google Knowledge cards. Okay, a lot of people have criticized those Google Knowledge cards because it's not entirely clear when you're looking at them where Google got that piece of information. They don't footnote it. For instance, a good Wikipedia article, and indeed the Psychology's Feminist Voices article and Skeptics Dictionary all list their sources at the bottom. So if you see something in that article and you're wondering where it came from, you can go down to the bottom of the article and figure out what the original source was. But on Google, those cards come up and you don't know where Google got that from. It could have scraped it from any website. It could have gotten it from Wikipedia or any of a number of things. And they've gotten crap for this. Here's one example of something they've gotten crap for. This is a set of Google cards. This looks a little bit different than the cards over to the right. These are some fancier cards. These were called presidential candidate cards. But as you can see on this screenshot, the search term here was GOP debate, and this was from back in January. And for some reason, Google was burping, or whatever you want to call it, but their algorithm for putting these cards up, when you searched anything about the Republican debate, all you would get in the cards was Carly Fiorina, who even then was a very minor candidate for president, never got very high in the polls. So why is she listed at the top? Well, probably her web gurus were doing an excellent job of, arranging her website so that she would rank very highly in Google. So she had good technologists, which is not surprising because she used to be the head of a technology company, right? So she probably
Yeah,
has.
but she didn't get anyone from HP to help her, I'm guessing.
Right, exactly. So this is an example of where people have given Google crap for, you know, surfacing bad information in those cards. And when I changed the Amy Tanner article on Wikipedia and also got the other two websites to change theirs, I noticed a similar thing. This is the result that I got just a few minutes ago searching for Amy Tanner. I typed Amy Tanner born, or you could type when was Amy Tanner born. And you'll see that it says in a big text right there at the top, April 14th, 1877, which is incorrect, right? I fixed this on all those sites many, many, many days ago. And in fact, if you look at the small print there right underneath the Wikipedia article, you can see her actual birthday. It even appears twice right there in the what they call the rich snippet there. But you can see that they have an old stale snippet from the Psychology's Feminist Voices site that shows April 14th, 1977, which is probably where they got this piece of information. This is actually fairly lucky that we can see where they got the information here. There are other cases where you'll get information surfaced over here, and it won't be clear at all where in the results Google found it. And I'm tracking this, and I'm going to be very interested to see when this result actually changes to be her correct birthday, when they actually finally notice. Probably one of the problems here is that Wikipedia, Google understands when sites are updated very quickly versus very slowly, and it's amazing how fast a change in Wikipedia will be reflected in the Google results. Because Google realizes that Wikipedia is constantly changing, and so their robots go back and check. For whatever reasons, Google robots have probably decided that Amy Tanner page on the Psychology's Feminist Voices site doesn't change very often, so they haven't gone back and seen that the text changed. But the bottom line is that this big piece of text up here at the top is wrong, and you don't have any good way of knowing that it's wrong unless you dig into the actual what they call organic results. If you click that Wikipedia article, there is a place in that article where her birth date is footnoted, and you can see exactly where I got it from, and probably go dig that out of Google Books. And same thing for the stuff on the right. And I have another result, which is when did Amy Tanner die? And same thing here. You can see that in this case they haven't refreshed the Skeptics Dictionary result. They're still showing the May 29th, 2014 version of the Amy Tanner page there that shows 1877 to 1964. So this is just a cautionary tale that whenever you see those information in those little cards with the large text, either off to the right side or above the organic search results, you should dig a little further and not assume that Google is pulling the right information out. That the right information is often out there, but Google may be using old material, and they don't refresh it as quickly as they refresh other parts of the search results.
I like the fact that over on the right,
it
has the little bit from Wikipedia, so it says she was born March 21st, 1870, but then immediately below that,
right.
It says she was born April 14th, 1877.
Yeah, it directly conflicts with itself because it's pulling information from multiple different sources. And I was surprised that they didn't. There's kind of a new part of Wikipedia called Wikidata, where Wikipedia is doing their version of what Google's doing with these cards, pulling out the sort of essential facts of Wikipedia and annotating them as data that can be accessed independently. And it has all the birthdays and dates of death and where people were born and middle names and all that stuff in a way that's very easy for computer programs like Google's search engine to pull out. And I updated the Wikidata card that is associated with Amy Tanner when I updated the article. So I was kind of surprised that Google isn't pulling that information more quickly, because they certainly pull the snips from Wikipedia like that. They're probably getting the you can get a raw feed from Wikipedia, and actually I've seen some people do some art projects where they just kind of show you the feed of everything that's changing on Wikipedia constantly, and it's somewhat dizzying to see how much work gets done on that site constantly. So anyway, be skeptical of those Google Knowledge cards, because they are often not correct. And I have got to, whoops, hang on. These slides are not cooperating. There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay. So anyway, that's the end of my topic. So I guess we are on to our TV MA rated segment, which is
Kids,
Eve.
close your eyes.
Cover your ears. Some people, and
That wouldn't
by
be any fun.
and by some people, I mean some members of this panel, and by some members of this panel, I mean Tim, may know that I have an interest in the etymologies of dirty words. In 2011, I gave a talk on the mythical origins of naughty words at Atlanta Skeptic Camp.
Yep.
So I was excited, if somewhat skeptical, to hear that a historian has discovered the earliest known example of the word fuck in the written English language. I first saw this on Facebook in a link David Gorski posted. Now, the history of fuck, meaning to copulate, is somewhat shrouded in mystery. It definitely seems to be Germanic and unrelated to apparently similar words in other non-Germanic Indo-European languages, such as Latin futuo futuere and French foudre, which are vulgar words, or are regarded as vulgar words, meaning to copulate, that start with an F, but the superficial similarity to English fuck is apparently coincidental. And although fuck is Germanic, it definitely does not come from Old English. Although there's disagreement, most experts, such as Jesse Scheidlower, a former editor of the Oxford English Dictionary and author of the book The F Word, seem to think that it entered English from a Low German language in the 15th century. Now, this explanation would be undermined by the discovery of historian Paul Booth of Keele University in the UK. His main research focus is medieval Cheshire, and while studying the Chester County court plea rolls, he discovered a man who was named 3 times between December 8, 1310, and September 28, 1311, as part of the process of outlawry. And this man's name is, if you could bring up the first slide, Roger Fuck by the Navel. That's Roger Fuck by the Navel.
Wow.
Yeah. This is Booth's explanation for the name. This surname...
That's a long name.
Yeah. This surname is presumably a nickname. I suggest it could either mean an actual attempt at copulation by an inexperienced youth, later reported by a rejected girlfriend, 14th century revenge porn perhaps, or it could be a rather elaborate way of describing someone regarded as a half-wit, i.e., that is the way he would think of performing the sexual act. Now, that's a very colorful explanation, but as I said, I'm a bit skeptical of all this. First, it isn't the earliest example of what appears to be fuck in written English. And all the early alleged examples, like this one, are proper nouns. They're names of people or places. You don't see it used as a verb or in an unambiguously sexual context until the late 15th century. And that's kind of suspicious, and would cause us to be perhaps skeptical of this name. Among the other early examples, one famous one is, wait for it, John LaFucker. In 1949, Carl Darling Buck, which is another fine name, in a dictionary of selected synonyms in the principal Indo-European languages, cited the name as appearing in 1278. And the calendar of closed rolls preserved in the Public Record Office, 1272 to 1279, records for April 26, 1278, if you could bring up the next slide, John LaFucker of Tithing, imprisoned at Peterborough for the death of Walter de Leighton and William de Leighton, wherewith he is charged, has letters to the Sheriff of Northampton to bail him. Now, there are two problems with this. First, it seems no one's ever actually, at least not since Carl Darling Buck, has actually located the manuscript. So the reference, it may not actually exist at all. You'll notice the quote from the calendars in modern English, which no one spoke in 1278. But secondly, it almost certainly doesn't mean what it sounds like it means. The most likely explanation is that it's a variation of fulcher, which means soldier. But there are some genuine examples of fuck. In 1287, we see the surnames Rick Windfuck and Rick Windfuck de Woodhouse in documents related to Sherwood Forest. Also in 1287, we find, next slide, and this is possibly my favorite, it's the surname Fuckbeggar. But, Fuckbeggar. But in these cases, the word fuck may mean to strike. There was an Anglo-Norman surname, Boutevelaine, which means strike the churl, and which may be like a French equivalent to fuckbeggar, which would be strike the beggar. Windfucker, or fuckwind, later came to be used to refer to the kestrel, the smallest of the falcons. Also possibly some sort of child's toy that, like a pinwheel sort of thing, I think. But presumably it has something to do with how the bird beats its wings in the wind, not how it copulates with the wind, because they don't do that. So these examples are all earlier than the one Booth found, and probably none of them means what it sounds like it means. Consequently, we should be cautious about Booth's interpretation of the word. I don't know exactly what fuck by the navel would mean, but then you wouldn't think, fuck beggar means strike the poor person just by looking at it either. So scholars haven't found any examples of fuck or similar Germanic words in their present meaning before the end of the 15th century. Which is odd that all of them, it seems to appear fairly late in the Middle Ages. Quite late in the Middle Ages. According to Scheidlower, fuck is one of several related words in various Germanic languages that have, according to him, sexual meanings as well as meanings such as to strike or to move back and forth. And these words generally begin with an F followed by a short vowel and a stop. A stop is a consonant where the air is physically stopped somewhere in the mouth and then expelled. So t, d, k, g, p, b, also called plosives. So English words in this group include fiddle, fidget, flit, flip, and frig, though none of those is attested as early as fuck. Part of the problem of unraveling the history of the word fuck has to do with the fact that it was apparently pretty much always taboo. As soon as it turned up, it was taboo. One theory suggests that fuck was a borrowing from Old Norse because there are more examples of the word in its modern usage in Scottish works, English works from Scotland, than in works from England. And Norse had a greater influence on Scottish and Northern English dialects of English than Southern English. There are a few problems with this. There are more early examples from Scotland, particularly in flyting poems, which are exchanges of insults. One example noted by Melissa Moore, author of Holy Shit, A Brief History of Swearing, is weakly fucked up foundling that nature made a dwarf. But the earliest examples are from England, so it may simply be that fuck wasn't as taboo in Scotland as it was in England, at least before the Reformation. In addition, there's no evidence that the word actually existed in Norse, so that makes that problematic. The earliest example of fuck in which the meaning is unambiguous is in a poem known as Flein Fleece, written about 1475. That's not its real name. It doesn't have one. It's a satirical poem focusing on Carmelite monks in Cambridgeshire, and it begins Flein Fleece and Freres, which is where the name comes from. And that means fleas, flies, and friars, which gives you an idea of its approach to this subject and the respect in which it holds the friars. It's a macaronic poem, meaning a poem that's written in a combination of at least two languages, in this case Latin and English. And it includes this line, if you can bring up the next slide, which says, Non sunt in cali kia geixt of pig ifm.
You sure that's not Klingon?
Well, you might think.
It's pretty close.
Not enough.
Yeah. Well, you could probably pronounce the X's that way. The first half is Latin, and it means they were not in heaven because. And the second half obviously appears to be gibberish. But it's not. It's actually a substitution cipher.
Oh.
If you substitute each letter with the previous letter in the alphabet, ignoring W, and treating U and V as the same letter, you get, if you can bring up the next slide, Non sunt in cali kia fukant wevis of Heli, which means they were not in heaven because they fuck the women of Ely, or the wives of Ely. Fuck, though an English word, is conjugated as if it were a Latin verb. Now, except for the word snick-snack, which is onomatopoetic and apparently either means a knife, or the swishing of a knife, or the bite of a flea, there's only one other use of cipher in the poem, and that's on the next slide, which says, Fratres cum knivis goeth about, and more gibberish, and this translates to Fratres cum knivis goeth about and suivit menis vivis, which means brothers with knives go about and swive men's wives. Swive, which derives from an Old English word meaning to move or revolve, was common in Middle English, and it means basically fuck. It was commonly used, but it was also considered vulgar. So it was common and common. These two lines are in the same stanza. So you see the usual Middle English equivalent of fuck, along with fuck itself in the same stanza. And sweeve, of course, sort of fell out of the language. I'm not going to say Shakespeare never used it because I haven't checked, but by early modern English, you're not seeing it very much. You're not seeing fuck very much either, but fuck sort of replaces sweeve. So, will Booth's discovery rewrite the history of the word fuck? Possibly, but probably not. It will add an interesting data point, which is nice, and Booth intends to publish an article about the discovery in Notes and Queries, a very old journal that publishes short articles on English language and literature, lexicography, history, and scholarly antiquarianism, with an emphasis on the factual rather than the speculative. So we'll have to see what he says and what the reactions to it are. But again, it isn't the earliest name that seems to incorporate fuck. And the consensus is that none of those names actually mean fuck. So I would suspect that that is going to be probably the reaction to this instance as well. Still a great name, though. Fuck by the navel.
Oh boy.
I didn't realize that name was that old. I really thought it was a fairly recent thing.
The word?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of mythical explanations for it. And you get some that say it's very old, that it's Anglo-Saxon, because a lot of the four-letter words are referred to as being Anglo-Saxon, and some are, and some aren't. And fuck is not, or at least no one's ever found it. But you also get ones that say that it's an acronym, that like for unlawful carnal knowledge, or fornication under command of king, or something like that. And it's not. You only get acronyms like that in the 20th century. Like I think around 1930, and the word's definitely older
like
than that.
snafu. And, yeah.
Yeah. And and you get the explanations of like the fornication under command of king, or something like that, that was supposed to be when the plague was going around, or something like that, suggesting it's old, but no. And definitely the word was older than that. Chaucer doesn't use it. Again, it wasn't used, it hasn't been found during his lifetime, but he doesn't allude to it. He does use swive, or sweeve. Shakespeare doesn't use it, although he seems to pun on it. In Merry Wives of Windsor, there may be other places as well, but in Merry Wives of Windsor, there's a Welsh schoolmaster who has a very bad accent. But one thing is that he pronounces the letter V like an F. So he's getting a child to go through the declension of the demonstrative adjective hic, haec, hoc. And he gets to the vocative case, and he calls it the focative case. And people think it's very improper. Mistress quickly thinks it's hilarious. So presumably that is punning on fuck. You also get the genitive plural is horum, harum, horum. So there's amusement over whore as well in the same scene. He also puns on the French equivalent of the word food, which isn't related but means the same thing. At least once. In Henry V, there's a scene where, what's her name, Catherine, who's going to marry Henry V. She doesn't speak any English, but she has a lady's maid who knows some English. She's pointing to body parts and saying, how do the English say this or that, and she points to the appendage at the end of her leg, and her maid says food, which sounds to her like food, presumably, and she thinks, oh, what improper language. Oh. So yeah, but so he seems to allude to it, so it definitely existed then. But again, it as soon as it appeared, it seemed to have been considered improper. The fact that its first appearance, when we know what it means, it was put in cipher, as was swive. Although in both cases, it's also accusing monks of screwing with the married women in town, which so that there could also be sort of a libelous thing. But yeah, and of course, it didn't end up appearing in dictionaries until mid-20th century. I think after the lawsuit about Lady Chatterley's lover, which had been banned because it uses the word fuck.
Ah.
So
They didn't want to ban the dictionary.
yeah, well, but it was also because the writers of the dictionary didn't want to. They just thought it was nasty.
Right.
That and the C word. That they kept it out of the Oxford English Dictionary for a long time because one of the editors said, well, I wouldn't want people to, find that word from us or learn that word from us. And someone else said, if they didn't already
People
know
read
the word,
the dictionary.
especially the Oxford English Dictionary, which is huge. If they didn't already know the word, they're not going to find the word. It's like, yes, but still, it's
People don't generally just, flip through dictionaries looking for words to use, or to learn about.
I do sometimes.
Well, you're weird.
That's true.
And I mean that in as a compliment.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that it's sort of like Wikipedia sometimes that you look at one thing and you look up one thing and then an hour later you're just somewhere else entirely.
How did I get here?
Yeah. Sometimes that happens with
that rabbit hole. Yep. That's the beauty of links.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Alex Murdoch said that the letter-by-letter cipher text looked like someone face planted into their keyboard.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, that's our 3 topics for this week. So I guess
we're done early.
Yeah, we're gonna get done on time. So I guess we need to do the trivia answer, and someone did get it right. Pierre in the YouTube comments said that it had to do with acupuncture. If I had told you that the country he was having surgery in was China, I might have given it away. Prior to the 1970s, acupuncture was not well known in the United States. And he had surgery, and the Chinese surgeons claimed they were giving him anesthesia through acupuncture while he was having surgery. There's some dispute of that claim. But he wrote an article about it in the New York Times, which of course is a very widely read newspaper, and a lot of historians of alternative medicine believe that that can be credited for a huge surge in the interest in the American public in acupuncture starting in 1971. So I think that brings us to book time. Well, let me go see. Well, you guys get your books ready. Let me go see what announcements we may have. If I can find my right browser window. I have way too many, as usual. Excuse me. All right, yeah, we do have announcements. Belated announcement, Eve, Ben Radford, and David Kopsel?
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, I see him all the time online, but I don't know how to pronounce that name. Discuss anonymity and the right to privacy on the Center for Inquiry blog. So check that out. And there's a new episode of Skepticality this week, and Eve has a take on The Conjuring 2. and the Enfield poltergeist case. So check that out. And who's got a book?
I got a book.
All right, go.
Imagine that you have 3 boxes, one containing 2 black marbles, one containing 2 white marbles, and the third one black marble and 1 white marble. The boxes are labeled with for their contents, BB, WW, and BW. But someone has switched the labels so that every box is now incorrectly labeled. You are allowed to take 1 marble at a time out of any box without looking inside, and by this process of sampling, you are to determine the contents of all 3 boxes. What is the smallest number of drawings needed to do this?
All right, Eve?
It is an honor and a privilege to be asked by the esteemed Oxford University Press to write the introduction to this wondrous book about the most important and powerful word in the English language. This is like a dream come true. A scholarly publisher of worldwide prestige has blessed this most sacred, most descriptive, most moving of all words. Fuck is a sacred word, you ask? Fucking A right it is. It's a word that one should not utter because it is such a terrible word of epic proportions, a word whose mere utterance is a sin, a fucking sin. Can you imagine? That's how fucking important fuck is.
Wow, we earned our TVMA right there. Science denial has significant consequences. AIDS denial caused over 300,000 deaths in South Africa. Vaccination denial has allowed preventable diseases to make a comeback. Climate science denial helped delay sorely needed mitigation policies, committing us to direr climate impacts for decades to come. Skepticism, by which I mean an evidence-based approach, is the antidote to denial. But skepticism doesn't just apply to how we practice our science. It must also apply to how we communicate our science. All right, Barbara, what was your book?
My book is I can never get this in the camera right. My Best Mathematical and Logical Puzzles by Martin Gardner.
Martin Gardner, of course.
I have
Eve?
a bunch of these little ones.
Mine is the foreword to the F Word by Lewis Black. Well, the foreword is by Lewis Black, and the book is by Jesse Shilower.
All right, and I was reading, not from a book, but from John Cook's article in the latest Skeptical Inquirer, which I just got in the mail today, so I thought I would read it, and I didn't have a book handy, so sue me.
That's okay.
Oh, and speaking of denial, there is there has been coming for quite some time a film version of the book about the famous libel case involving the term Holocaust denier and David Irving, which involved a professor here in Atlanta, Deborah Lipstadt. And they've made it into a movie, and the trailer for it just came out today. So if you look at the usual places where you see movie trailers, you can see the trailer for it. The movie comes out in September, and it looks pretty good. So that's that. And we have any other unfinished business that we haven't taken care of? I don't see any questions or anything like that. No, I'm not seeing anything. So it must be time to dance.
Okay. Can barely hear it.
Oh.
There we go.
Virtual Skeptics is an independent production of What'sTheHarm.net, Skeptical Humanities, Brian Gregory, ICBS Everywhere, and Doubtful News. Our logo was designed by Sarah Mayhew at sarahmayhew.com. Our theme music is by Musicant and is used with permission.